She stood up at her dad's wedding, and what she said stopped. Everything cold. It was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. The flowers were fresh, the guests were smiling, and the backyard was glowing in the warm California sun. But just as the groom reached for his bride's hand, a 12-year-old girl stood up from the second row, tears in her eyes and a flash drive in her palm. What she revealed next shattered every illusion and saved her father's life. "Stop the wedding!"
Yes, say it.
12-year-old girl stuns guests and shocks. Her father, with 9 chilling words. The sun was shining, the white chairs were lined up in perfect rows, and the scent of freshly cut roses filled the air. It was the kind of California morning that felt made for a fairy tale wedding. Guests in pastel dresses and tailored suits chatted under the string lights as they waited for the ceremony to begin. The groom, Thomas, a successful businessman and single father, stood at the altar, smiling wider than he had in years. After nearly a decade of heartbreak following the loss of his wife, he was finally ready to open his heart again. At the other end of the aisle, Clara appeared like a vision in white. Her dress trailed behind her in soft ripples of satin, and every eye in the crowd was locked on her as she made her grand entrance. To most people, it looked like a picture-perfect moment, one for the family albums, but not for everyone. In the second row, 12-year-old Kathy sat in silence, her small hands clutching the hem of her sky-blue dress. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She'd rehearsed what she was about to do at least 100 times, but nothing could prepare her for the real thing. Because what she was about to say wasn't just bold. It would shatter the illusion of love, loyalty, and trust in front of nearly 100 people. Just as the officiant asked the guests to rise, Kathy stood up, her voice shaking but clear. "Dad, you can't marry her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The music stopped. Clara froze mid-step, and Thomas, sweet, well-meaning Thomas, turned with a look of pure confusion, his hands trembling at his sides. "What's going on, sweetheart?" he asked gently, trying to hold on to the moment. But the moment was already gone. Kathy's courage had pierced through the performance, and what followed would unravel a twisted truth no one was ready to hear. This wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about teenage rebellion. It was about saving the man she loved most from the woman who had fooled them all. In less than 60 seconds, Kathy's words would turn a $20,000 wedding into a criminal investigation, and a backyard ceremony into the scene of one of the most shocking betrayals no one saw coming. From bedtime stories to broken trust, how a father's love nearly cost him everything before the heartbreak, before the shattered wedding, before the flash drive full of secrets and a 12-year-old girl bravely standing in front of 100 stunned guests. There was just a father and his daughter. Thomas wasn't just any dad. He was the kind of father who packed school lunches with sticky notes that said, "You've got this," and sat in the front row of every elementary school play, even the one where Kathy forgot her lines. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't perfect. But after losing his wife to cancer 7 years earlier, he became Kathy's entire world. And she was his. She had only been 5 when her mom passed. The memories were scattered. Her mother's lavender-scented hugs, the lullabies at bedtime, the way she'd brush Kathy's hair while humming softly. After that, it was just the two of them. Thomas had no family nearby, no built-in village, so he became everything. The chauffeur, the short-order cook, the nightlight checker, and bad dream chaser. And he did it all while running his own real estate business from their modest 2-story home in suburban Colorado. He'd tuck Kathy into bed at 8:30 p.m., then spend the next 3 hours catching up on contracts and calls. And even when stress weighed heavy on his shoulders, he never let it touch her. Their Friday night pizza tradition, Saturday morning hikes, and summer road trips in the old Chevy Tahoe were sacred. But even the strongest hearts get lonely. Around Kathy's 10th birthday, Thomas started to change. She noticed the way he lingered over old photo albums more often. How he'd stare out the kitchen window for a little too long while sipping his morning coffee. He smiled less, laughed less. Kathy may have been young, but she was perceptive. She missed her mom, but more than anything, she hated seeing her dad sad. So when Clara came along, a dazzling woman with a megawatt smile and an effortless charm, Kathy wanted to believe it was fate. They met at a charity event downtown. Clara was everything Thomas hadn't had in years, vibrant, elegant, and attentive. She asked about Kathy's school. She brought brownies to their housewarming party. She remembered Kathy's birthday without being reminded. At first, Kathy was thrilled. Her dad was smiling again. The house felt warmer, happier. She even started calling Clara Ms. C, thinking that maybe, just maybe, she could love someone like a mom again. They were building something new. At least, that's what it seemed like. But love can make even the wisest people blind. And sometimes, when someone fills a void too perfectly, it's because they planned it that way. What Thomas didn't see, couldn't see, was how Clara's sweetness dimmed whenever Kathy was alone with her. He didn't hear the sharp comments behind closed doors, or the way Clara would sigh dramatically when Kathy asked for help with her homework. He didn't notice the forced smile Kathy gave whenever Clara wrapped an arm around her in public. He chalked up Kathy's discomfort to growing pains, to jealousy, to the adjustment of having a new woman in their lives. After all, Clara had done nothing wrong in his eyes. She made him happy again. Wasn't that what counted? But what Thomas didn't know, what he couldn't imagine in his worst nightmare, was that the woman he was planning to marry wasn't just cold behind the scenes. She was dangerous, calculated, and using every ounce of her charm to get what she wanted. And Kathy, the little girl who had grown up believing her dad was her hero, now had to become his protector. What's so striking in this story isn't just the betrayal. It's how easy it is for good people to be fooled when they're desperate for hope. Thomas wasn't naive. He was human, a man who had carried grief for nearly a decade and finally found someone who made life feel colorful again. But sometimes the people who smile the brightest are hiding the darkest intentions. And when you love someone with your whole heart, the red flags can look like fireworks. It wasn't that Thomas didn't love Kathy enough. It was that he couldn't imagine that someone he trusted so deeply could also be capable of hurting the person he loved most. And in that blind spot, Clara thrived. Until Kathy decided enough was enough. The perfect woman, or the perfect lie. How Clara fooled everyone, until a 12-year-old saw the truth. If you asked anyone at the time, they would have told you Clara was perfect. The kind of woman you only see in Hallmark movies or glossy bridal magazines. She had the smile of a Southern belle, the elegance of a seasoned hostess, and the voice that could calm a room with just a few gentle words. When she walked into a space, whether it was a PTA meeting or a backyard barbecue, people noticed, not because she demanded attention, but because she exuded a quiet, polished grace that made you feel like you were in the presence of someone special. And for Thomas, she was just that. He met Clara at a charity gala downtown, one of those black tie events with hors d'oeuvres on silver trays and string quartets playing top 40 hits. Thomas wasn't even planning to stay long. He was there on business, making small talk with potential clients, when Clara appeared in a deep emerald dress that matched her eyes and a laugh that felt like sunlight. She introduced herself with confidence and asked questions that showed genuine curiosity, or at least what seemed like it. Within minutes, Thomas was hooked. He didn't even try to play it cool. After years of loneliness and single parenting, her attention felt like a warm bath after a long day. She listened. She complimented. She made him feel seen in a way he hadn't felt since his wife passed. So when she asked about Kathy, Thomas lit up. He told her everything. How smart his daughter was, how strong, how much she loved reading and drawing and helping him make pancakes every Sunday morning. Clara smiled sweetly. I'd love to meet her sometime. And she did. Not long after that gala, Clara started stopping by more frequently. At first, it was just for coffee, then lunch, then full weekends. She brought Kathy little gifts, bracelets, hair ties, a sketchbook, just because. She baked cookies in their kitchen and offered to help with homework. She even sat through Frozen for the 100th time and sang along with Let It Go. To Thomas, it was a miracle. His daughter was laughing more. The house didn't feel so heavy anymore. He caught himself humming while making coffee, smiling when he saw Clara's car pull into the driveway. It felt like his life was finally back on track, like the chapter of pain was finally giving way to something good again. Even Kathy let her guard down. At first, she wasn't sure about Clara, but the way she tucked Kathy's hair behind her ear, the soft encouragement she gave during school projects, the way she told Kathy how lucky your dad is to have you, it all felt real. For the first time in 7 years, Kathy let herself hope. Maybe she could have a mom again. Maybe this was how happy families were made. But like any perfect illusion, the cracks came slowly, quietly. Kathy noticed that Clara's kindness had a switch. One moment she was full of sugary smiles, the next cold as ice. If Kathy left a mess in the living room, Clara's tone would shift. "You're old enough to know better," she'd snap, her eyes narrowing. If Kathy spilled a drink at dinner, Clara's lips would purse into a thin, disappointed line. "Do you want your father thinking you're careless?" But it was always when Thomas wasn't around, never in front of him. When he was near, Clara was warmth and patience incarnate. When he wasn't, she was sharp-edged and simmering. And Kathy started to feel it in her bones. Something was off. It wasn't just mood swings, it was methodical. Like Clara was keeping score, testing boundaries, slowly chipping away at Kathy's confidence while keeping Thomas blissfully unaware. Still, Kathy tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was being dramatic. Maybe it really was just adjustment. Clara was, after all, so nice to everyone else. Everyone loved her. The neighbors, Thomas's co-workers, even the ladies at church. No one saw what Kathy saw. No one felt what she felt. The chill behind the charm, the pressure behind the praise. But deep down, Kathy knew. Clara's perfection wasn't real. It was a mask. And while it dazzled everyone around her, Kathy could sense the truth hiding just beneath the surface. The woman her father loved wasn't loving them back. Not really. And once you see the cracks, you can't unsee them. Behind closed doors. The shocking side of Clara. Only one girl ever saw. From the outside looking in, Clara was everything a single dad like Thomas could hope for. Kind, composed, helpful, and sweet to his daughter. But what no one else knew, what no one else could know, was that the moment the front door clicked shut behind Thomas each morning, Clara became someone entirely different. To the world, she was graceful and generous. But to 12-year-old Kathy, she was cold, sharp, and terrifying. It started small, like most storms do. At first, it was just little comments. "You should really comb your hair before breakfast, Kathy. Don't you want to look presentable for your father?" Or, "It wouldn't kill you to clean your room without being asked. Girls your age shouldn't be so messy." They were said with a smile, a sweet voice, but the words always landed like punches. Then came the mood swings. If Kathy made a mistake, spilled a little juice on the counter, or forgot to take her shoes off in the entryway, Clara's eyes would darken. Her tone would drop to a quiet, tight-lipped hiss. "You're not a baby anymore. Act like it." Once, Kathy left a toy on the couch. Clara picked it up, placed it in the trash can, and said with an icy calm, "If you don't respect your things, neither will I." But the real shift came when Thomas wasn't home. That's when Clara dropped the act completely. She would criticize Kathy's clothes, her voice, even the way she breathed too loudly while reading. "You sound like a piglet," she whispered once, when Kathy was curled up on the couch with a book. "No wonder you don't have friends." When Kathy tried to stand up for herself, Clara didn't raise her voice. She lowered it. That was worse. Her threats were quiet, calculated, and deeply cruel. "If you tell your dad, he won't believe you," she said one night while straightening up the kitchen. "He loves me now. I make him happy. You're just a reminder of what he lost." Kathy's heart sank. She felt like she was floating in a nightmare only she could see. Everyone thought Clara was the answer to their prayers, but Kathy knew the truth. She just didn't know how to prove it. One night, Kathy knocked over a glass vase while trying to reach the TV remote. The vase, a tall, decorative piece Clara had brought from her personal collection, shattered into jagged pieces across the hardwood floor. Clara stormed in, her heels clicking like gunshots. "Do you know how much that cost?" she snapped, grabbing Kathy's arm tightly enough to leave red marks. "You little brat! One day you're going to regret everything you do, and no one will be around to save you." Kathy was frozen. Her throat was dry. She could barely breathe. The next morning, Clara was back to smiling, bringing Thomas a homemade cinnamon roll and laughing about how clumsy girls can be at that age. Thomas never saw the mark on Kathy's arm. She wore long sleeves that day. From that point on, Kathy walked on eggshells. She kept her voice soft, her steps quiet, her space spotless. She tried to avoid Clara completely, spending hours in the backyard, sitting quietly with her sketchbook, or hiding out in her room. But none of it helped. The more Kathy tried to disappear, the more Clara seemed determined to break her. Kathy wanted to say something. She wanted to scream, "She's not who you think she is." But every time she opened her mouth, Clara would appear behind her, giving her that look, that icy, knowing glare that said, "Try it. Just try it." The scariest part wasn't Clara's words, it was how controlled she was, how strategic, how expertly she played her role when it counted. It was like Clara had read a book called How to Fool Everyone Except the One Who Sees Through You, and she had studied it cover to cover. Everyone around them saw a perfect woman preparing to marry a grieving widower and become a stepmother to a sweet little girl. Only Kathy knew that behind that wedding dress and flawless smile was a ticking time bomb, and she was the only one who heard it ticking. She set me up. How Clara framed a 12-year-old girl to get her out of the way. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. The kind of day where the sky was clear, the house smelled like vanilla candles, and nothing seemed out of place. But in just a few minutes, Kathy would go from being a beloved daughter to a suspected thief, all thanks to one perfectly timed lie. And the worst part? Her own father believed it. Kathy had been walking on eggshells for weeks. Ever since Clara moved in, home didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage, and Clara was always the star. When Thomas was around, she was warm, affectionate, and always smiling. But when he left, that smile faded fast. Behind closed doors, Clara had made it clear. Kathy was in the way. She didn't belong in this picture-perfect romance Clara was building. And now Clara had a plan to remove her entirely. It started innocently enough. "Sweetheart," Clara said one afternoon, her voice dripping with honey, "can you help me for just a minute?" Kathy hesitated in the doorway of Clara's bedroom. Her gut screamed not to go in, but she didn't want to upset her dad, so she nodded. Clara handed her a small velvet jewelry pouch, elegant, soft, and weighty. "Just hold on to this for a moment while I organize my earrings. I trust you." Kathy stood there quietly, clutching the pouch, waiting for Clara to finish. After a few minutes, Clara told her she could leave it on the dresser. Kathy placed it down and returned to her room, relieved the encounter was over. She didn't think about it again until later that night. Thomas was sitting on the couch reading the sports section when Clara rushed in, holding the pouch with wide, panicked eyes. "Thomas," she gasped, "my necklace! The one you gave me last month, it's gone. He sat up immediately. Gone? Are you sure? I had it earlier. Kathy was the last one who touched it, she said softly, almost like she didn't want to accuse, but just had to be honest. Kathy's heart dropped. I didn't take anything, she cried. You told me to hold it. I gave it back. Thomas's brow furrowed. Is that true, Kathy? Yes, I swear. But Clara played her part to perfection. Her lip trembled, eyes watery. Maybe she's struggling more than we thought. She's been acting distant. Maybe she needs structure, guidance. That was when Thomas said the words Kathy would never forget. Maybe boarding school isn't such a bad idea. It felt like the floor fell out from under her. Her own father, her hero, thought she had stolen from him. Worse, that she needed to be sent away because of it. Clara had set her up, and it worked. That night, Clara discovered the missing necklace in Kathy's backpack. And just like that, Kathy went from daughter to delinquent in her father's eyes. Her throat burned from crying. She tried to explain, begged him to believe her. But the look on his face was already filled with disappointment. I just don't understand why you do this, he said. I didn't, Kathy whispered, broken. She planted it. But no one heard her. The next morning, Thomas sat her down at the kitchen table. The light coming through the window painted soft shadows across the floor, but nothing about this moment felt warm. I love you, he said gently, but I think some time away will help. Boarding school will give you the discipline and stability you need. Clara and we just want what's best for you. Kathy stared at her orange juice glass. Her hands were trembling. This wasn't about discipline, it was about getting rid of her. Clara had framed her perfectly. No fingerprints, no fuss, just a quiet, deliberate move to erase the only threat to her plan. And Thomas couldn't even see it. That night, Kathy made a vow. If no one was going to believe her words, she'd bring proof. Cold, undeniable proof. Because Clara wasn't just a liar, she was dangerous, and Kathy was done being quiet. I read her messages, and my blood ran cold. How a 12-year-old uncovered a chilling plot against her dad. Kathy didn't mean to snoop. She wasn't the kind of kid who went through people's things, but something deep in her gut, something that had been whispering for weeks, finally screamed loud enough that she couldn't ignore it. It happened on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. Clara had gone out to meet with the florist for the wedding, and Thomas was upstairs on a conference call. For the first time in days, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Kathy wandered into the kitchen to grab a snack, but her eyes immediately locked on something she had never seen unattended before. Clara's phone. It was sitting on the marble countertop, screen down, buzzing softly with notifications. Clara never left her phone lying around. Ever. Kathy's heart started to pound. Her fingertips tingled. She told herself to walk away, that it wasn't her business. But then she remembered the threats, the lies, and the look on her dad's face when he said, maybe boarding school would help. No one believed her. But maybe, just maybe, the truth was right there, one swipe away. With trembling hands, Kathy picked up the phone and unlocked it, using the pattern she'd secretly memorized weeks earlier. The screen opened, and what she saw made her breath hitch in her throat. Dozens of messages, from someone named Nathan. She didn't recognize the name, but the tone of the messages was anything but professional. It was intimate, familiar, like lovers. Kathy's hands shook as she scrolled, her eyes moving faster and faster. The texts weren't just flirty, they were strategic. They talked about Thomas, about his bank accounts, his assets, his signature. Nathan wrote, once he signs over the business, it's all ours. Clara responded, he's so in love he won't read a thing. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. Kathy's stomach dropped, but then came the part that made her knees go weak. Another message from Clara. Don't worry, the poison is ready. I'll use it on the honeymoon. He won't feel a thing. Poison. Not metaphor, not code, real poison. Kathy had to reread it 3 times to believe what she was seeing. This wasn't some petty scheme. This was murder. Clara wasn't just trying to steal from her father. She was planning to end his life. It got worse. Kathy opened the photo gallery, desperate for confirmation. What she found made her eyes burn. There were dozens of pictures of Clara and Nathan, some in restaurants, some in a hotel room. One photo showed Nathan's arm around Clara's waist as they smiled into the mirror, wrapped in bathrobes. Kathy's heart twisted into knots. Her dad, who still wore his wedding ring on a chain around his neck, was being played like a fool. And the woman he trusted most was laughing about it behind his back. But that wasn't all. Buried in a folder labeled Work, Kathy found PDFs, legal documents, contracts for power of attorney, account transfers, and changes to life insurance policies. Clara and Nathan had planned everything. They weren't just robbing Thomas, they were erasing him. And no one suspected a thing. Kathy's hands were ice cold as she downloaded everything onto a USB drive she grabbed from the home office. She even screen-recorded a few of the audio messages Clara had sent late at night, talking about how easy Thomas was to manipulate and how Kathy would go away soon enough. She sat on the floor of her room, shaking, the USB drive in her lap. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. But mostly, she wanted to save her dad. Because no one else could. She had tried telling him before, but he dismissed it. Clara had already poisoned his judgment, with charm instead of chemicals. And now, Kathy realized, she didn't just need to speak louder. She needed to prove it. This wasn't about feelings anymore. It was about evidence. About showing everyone, not just her dad, but the entire wedding full of guests, what Clara was hiding beneath her perfect smile and polished nails. That night, Kathy didn't sleep. Instead, she stayed up rehearsing what she would say, what she would show. She printed copies of the most damning screenshots, backed up the files, and even wrote out her speech on a sticky note. Because the truth was clear now. Clara wasn't marrying Thomas because she loved him. She was marrying him to bury him. And Kathy? She was the only one who knew. But not for long. The wedding will be her stage. But the truth will be mine. How a 12-year-old girl turned the big day into a public expose. The day was fast approaching. The one that was supposed to be all about vows, champagne toasts, and happily ever afters. But to 12-year-old Kathy, it felt more like a ticking time bomb. Because she knew something no one else did. Her dad was about to marry a woman who was planning to kill him. She had the evidence. Screenshots of text messages between Clara and her secret lover Nathan, voice recordings of them plotting to take over her father's assets, and photos that made Kathy's stomach turn. But what good was the truth if no one was willing to hear it? She had tried telling her dad before. She had tried with all the sincerity and fear and desperation a little girl could possibly express. But every time Clara found a way to twist it, making Kathy look like the problem. And her dad, blinded by the idea of finally finding love again, didn't see it. So Kathy made a decision that no child should ever have to make. She would stop the wedding, and she wouldn't just stop it. She would expose it, publicly, boldly, with everything she had. That night, Kathy sat at her desk, with the glow of her fairy lights overhead, staring at the USB drive clenched in her palm. Inside that small piece of plastic was everything. Clara's lies, Clara's betrayal, and Clara's plan to use poison on the honeymoon. All documented. All real. She knew Clara would try to deny it, so she needed something undeniable. An audience. The wedding would be held in their backyard under a beautifully decorated white trellis lined with fresh roses. Over 75 guests were expected. Neighbors, co-workers, even a few distant relatives Kathy hadn't seen in years. But that's what made it perfect. The more witnesses, the stronger the truth. She rehearsed her speech over and over again in the mirror, holding a hairbrush like a microphone. "You can't marry her, Dad. She's lying to you. She's not who you think she is. I have proof." Her hands shook the first few times, but with each repetition she grew stronger, sharper, more certain. This wasn't just about stopping a wedding. It was about saving her father's life. She printed out copies of the text messages, highlighted the most damning lines in neon yellow. She labeled audio files on the USB like a courtroom exhibit. Recording number 1. Clara and Nathan planning to get rid of him. She put the drive into a zippered pouch and hid a backup copy inside the sole of her ballet flat, just in case Clara tried something. She even thought through where to sit. Front row, left side of the aisle. From there, she'd have a clear view of the altar, and could stand up the second the officiant said, "If anyone has reason, these two should not be wed." That would be her cue. The night before the wedding, Clara was practically glowing. She floated through the house in a silk robe, humming to herself as she talked about flower arrangements, photographers, and how perfect tomorrow was going to be. Kathy sat quietly at the dinner table, her spaghetti going cold, heart pounding so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Clara smiled across the table. "You okay, sweetheart? You've been awfully quiet." "I'm fine," Kathy said softly, gripping her fork like a lifeline. Thomas smiled, mistaking her silence for nerves. "She's probably just overwhelmed. Big day for all of us." He had no idea. None of them did. That night, Kathy didn't sleep. She laid in bed staring at the ceiling, repeating the words she planned to say. Her palms were sweaty, her stomach twisted in knots, but her resolve was steel. Clara had taken everything from them: trust, peace, and almost a future. But Kathy was done being silent. She wasn't just a kid. She was a daughter, a fighter. And tomorrow, in front of every smiling guest, every clapping friend, and every oblivious loved one, she would make the truth louder than Clara's lies. The wedding might have been Clara's perfect day, but Kathy was going to make sure it was her last. "Speak now or forever hold your peace." She spoke, and the whole wedding fell apart. The chairs were perfectly lined up. White roses draped the archway where Kathy's father, Thomas, stood beaming in a crisp navy suit. The air smelled of fresh-cut flowers and expensive perfume. Guests whispered excitedly, phones ready to capture what they believed would be the beginning of a beautiful love story. Clara floated down the aisle in a designer wedding gown, her veil glittering in the sunlight, her smile picture-perfect. But to Kathy, it all felt like a lie. She sat in the second row, heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. The USB drive pressed against her leg in her pocket. Her fingers were clenched tightly around her speech, now crumpled from hours of nervous rehearsing. Her mouth was dry. Her legs felt like jelly. But her mind? Clear as day. She had to do it. She had to stop this wedding. Because the man standing under that arch wasn't just the groom. He was her dad, her best friend, the man who tucked her in every night after her mom passed away. And the woman he was about to marry? She was planning to poison him on their honeymoon, and Kathy had proof. As the officiant cleared his throat and began the ceremony, Kathy's ears rang. His words blurred until she heard the one line she'd been waiting for. "If anyone has reason, these two should not be wed. Speak now or forever hold your peace." Silence. And then, her voice, trembling but fierce, "Stop! You can't marry her, Dad." Gasps erupted across the yard. All heads turned toward the small girl standing on wobbly legs, tears in her eyes but fire in her voice. Thomas blinked, startled. "Kathy?" "She's lying to you," Kathy said louder this time. "She doesn't love you. She's using you. I can prove it." Clara's fake smile flickered. Her eyes darted around the crowd. "Sweetheart," she said with a sickly sweet tone, "you're just nervous. It's okay." "No, it's not," Kathy snapped. She pulled the USB from her pocket and held it up. "Everything's on here. Messages, photos, a plan to take your money, and poison you." Gasps turned to murmurs. The officiant stepped back, unsure what to do. Guests leaned in, eyes wide, whispering. Thomas's face went pale. "Kathy, is this a joke?" "She's working with a man named Nathan," Kathy said, stepping closer to the altar. "I saw their messages. They've been planning this for months. She was going to get you to sign over your accounts during the honeymoon and then—" "Enough," Clara snapped, the sweetness gone. "You little brat, you have no idea what you're talking about." But Kathy stood firm. "Play the recording." One of Thomas's business partners, who had a laptop for slideshow photos, rushed to plug in the USB. The speakers crackled, and then Clara's voice filled the air. "Once the wedding's over, he'll sign whatever I give him. Then we'll take everything. He won't know what hit him." The crowd erupted. People stood, shocked. Clara's mask was slipping fast. "I trusted you," Thomas said quietly, his voice shaking. "You should have stayed out of this," Clara hissed, turning to Kathy, her face twisted with rage. But it was too late. Police sirens wailed in the distance. One of the guests had called the authorities. As Clara tried to walk away, 2 officers approached and took her into custody, reading her rights while the guests watched in stunned silence. Thomas fell to his knees in front of Kathy, tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I should have listened." Kathy hugged him tight. "You're safe now, Dad. That's all I ever wanted." The wedding didn't end in vows or cake or dancing. It ended in handcuffs and a hard truth exposed by a 12-year-old girl who refused to stay silent. And as Kathy stood with her father, surrounded by shocked guests and wilted roses, she didn't feel afraid anymore. She felt powerful. Because sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one that saves a life. I should have believed her. A father's painful wake-up call, after ignoring his daughter's warnings. The sun had nearly set. Guests had gone home in stunned silence. The once beautiful wedding arch stood half-collapsed in the backyard, the white roses now drooping like a symbol of what could have been. And in the middle of the mess, Thomas sat on the steps of the porch, his hands trembling, his tie loosened, and his heart completely shattered. Just hours earlier, he was about to say "I do" to the woman he thought would finally fill the hole in his life. The woman he believed would bring peace, laughter, and love back into his home. Clara had seemed perfect, too perfect, and when his daughter Kathy began to voice her doubts, he brushed them off as childish fears, jealousy, resistance to change. But now he knew the truth. She wasn't just wrong for him, she was dangerous. Inside the house, Kathy sat on the couch, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of lukewarm cocoa. Her hair was messy, her dress wrinkled, and her eyes red from crying. But beneath all of that was a quiet strength that had kept her father alive. When Thomas finally found the courage to face her, he stepped into the living room slowly. The guilt on his face was undeniable. "Hey," he said softly. Kathy looked up. Thomas sat beside her, hands folded, voice shaky. "I don't even know where to start." "You don't have to," Kathy whispered. "You're safe now. That's all I wanted." "No," Thomas said firmly. "You deserve more than that. You tried to warn me again and again, and I didn't listen. I was so caught up in what I wanted to feel that I ignored what was right in front of me." His voice broke as he continued. "You've always been the most important person in my life. After your mom passed, I made a promise to protect you, to keep you safe. And somehow, you ended up protecting me." Kathy blinked, her lips trembling. "I was scared, Dad. Not just of her. I was scared I'd lose you, too." Thomas reached over, pulling her into a hug. "I'm so sorry I made you feel alone in this. You were brave. So much braver than I ever expected. You stood up, even when everyone doubted you, including me." Kathy didn't speak. She just rested her head on his shoulder as he continued. "I didn't want to see the truth because I was desperate to feel whole again. Clara came into my life when I was lonely, grieving, and tired. She made me feel seen, but it wasn't real. None of it was. They sat in silence for a moment, the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the background, the weight of everything that had happened still sinking in. "I don't know how to fix this," Thomas finally said. "But I promise you, from this moment forward, I will listen. I'll trust you. I won't ever put someone else's words above yours again." Kathy gave a small nod. "Okay? And if you ever feel something's wrong, I won't question your instincts. You were right when no one else was. That matters." The next morning, Thomas called off work. He made breakfast, real breakfast, with pancakes, bacon, and orange juice, just like they used to do on Sundays before everything got complicated. They didn't talk much that morning. They didn't need to. The healing had begun. In the days that followed, Thomas helped police hand over the remaining evidence Kathy had gathered. Clara and Nathan were charged with multiple counts, including conspiracy, attempted murder, and fraud. The story hit local news. People were shocked. Neighbors who once gushed over Clara's grace now whispered in shame that they hadn't noticed the signs. But none of it mattered more than this. Thomas had his daughter back, and Kathy had her dad's trust. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the wind sway through the trees, Thomas turned to her and said, "You saved my life, and I'll spend the rest of mine making sure you know how proud I am of you." Kathy smiled. They had lost something, yes, but they had also found something stronger. A bond forged not just through love, but through truth, courage, and a girl who refused to let her father walk into the arms of danger. And that kind of love, that kind of trust, it was unbreakable. I thought I was the one protecting her. How a father learned his daughter was the real hero. All along. The days after the wedding that never was were quieter than Thomas expected, but not in the peaceful way he had imagined. There were no thank you cards to write, no honeymoon to pack for, no photos to frame. Instead, there were long silences, heavy thoughts, and a slow, painful unpacking of reality. Clara was gone. The woman he had nearly married was now behind bars, her picture plastered across local news stations under headlines like, "Fiancée charged in chilling plot to poison wealthy businessman." The story shocked the town. Neighbors were stunned. Friends were apologetic. But none of it could erase the fact that Thomas had almost handed over his life, literally and financially, to a woman who only loved the illusion of wealth and control. And the one person who saved him? His 12-year-old daughter, Kathy. Every time he looked at her now, curled up on the couch in her oversized hoodie, drawing quietly in her sketchbook, he felt a fresh wave of awe and guilt. She hadn't just raised concerns. She hadn't just voiced doubt. She had risked everything. She stood up in front of 80 guests, exposed the truth when no one wanted to hear it, and stopped a wedding with nothing more than a shaky voice and the strength of her convictions. And Thomas? He had almost dismissed her as just a confused little girl. One evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line and bathed the living room in a golden haze, Thomas broke the silence. "Kathy," he said gently, sitting down beside her, "can I tell you something I should have said a long time ago?" She looked up, wide-eyed but calm. "Okay." He took a deep breath. "I always thought it was my job to protect you. After your mom passed, I promised myself that I would be strong for you, that I would never let anything bad touch your life. But I was wrong." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "I didn't realize you were the one protecting me," he continued, his voice cracking. "You saw what I couldn't. You spoke up when no one else would. And you stood your ground even when I didn't believe you. That takes a kind of courage I don't think I've ever had." Kathy didn't speak at first. She just leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I thought you'd hate me," she whispered after a moment, "for ruining the wedding, for everything." Thomas wrapped his arm around her. "No, sweetheart, you didn't ruin anything. You saved everything that matters." And it was true. That moment, more than any ceremony, more than any dream of a new beginning, was the turning point. It was the moment Thomas let go of the guilt and stepped fully into the truth. His daughter wasn't just growing up. She was already someone incredible. In the weeks that followed, their bond deepened. Mornings were spent making breakfast together again, scrambled eggs and toast with strawberry jam, just like when Kathy was little. Afternoons were filled with walks around the neighborhood, talking about everything from school projects to her favorite movies. And at night, Thomas found himself listening more, really listening, to the things Kathy said, no longer brushing them off as childish thoughts. The legal case against Clara and Nathan strengthened with the evidence Kathy had collected. Investigators praised her attention to detail. A local journalist even asked for an interview, calling her a young whistleblower with a fearless heart. Thomas declined the interview on her behalf. "She doesn't need headlines," he said. "She just needs to know she's loved." And she did. One Saturday, while they were sitting on the porch swing sipping lemonade, Kathy looked at him and asked, "Do you think Mom would be proud of me?" Thomas felt his throat tighten. He looked at her, this brave, brilliant, beautiful soul, and smiled. "She'd be more than proud," he said. "She'd be in awe." And in that quiet moment, father and daughter knew that no matter how broken the past had been, their future was unshakable. They had faced deception, danger, and doubt, and come out stronger. Because love built on truth, it doesn't just survive, it saves. From broken to unbreakable, how a father and daughter rebuilt their lives after betrayal. The house felt different now. It wasn't just the silence that hung in the air or the absence of Clara's perfume. It was the energy, the shift that happens when a storm finally passes, leaving behind a quiet kind of clarity. The once busy home that buzzed with wedding plans and polite small talk now echoed with honesty, reflection, and something Thomas hadn't felt in a long time: peace. But it wasn't easy. After Clara's arrest and the collapse of what was meant to be a picture-perfect wedding, Thomas and Kathy found themselves standing among the emotional rubble of their lives. The decorations were still up in the backyard. Her dress still hung in the closet. And yet, everything had changed. The laughter that once echoed through the hallways was gone, but in its place was something deeper, something real. Thomas spent the first few days in near silence. He moved around the house like a ghost, ashamed, humiliated, and grieving not just the woman he almost married, but the man he had almost become. A man too blind to see the truth, too eager to feel whole again to recognize a wolf in a silk dress. Kathy gave him space, but she stayed close. She didn't gloat or say, "I told you so." She simply existed near him, like a steady heartbeat in a house that had almost flatlined. One evening, as they sat on the front porch watching the sun sink low behind the trees, Thomas finally broke the silence. "You doing okay?" he asked. Kathy shrugged, hugging her knees to her chest. "I think so. I don't have nightmares anymore." Thomas's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry you ever had them." She looked at him, her voice small but sure. "You didn't know, Dad. I was scared to tell you, but I didn't want to lose you." Thomas swallowed the lump in his throat. "And I almost lost you because I didn't listen. But I'm here now, and I'm never going to doubt you again." In the weeks that followed, they found comfort in new routines. Pancake Saturdays returned. Movie nights with popcorn and too much butter became regular again. And even the little things, like Kathy leaving her sketchbooks all over the dining table, felt like signs of healing. Thomas also began therapy. He wanted to understand why he had missed the warning signs, why he had let someone so dangerous so close. It wasn't just for him, it was for Kathy. If he wanted to rebuild trust, he had to do the work. Kathy, too, began to grow in confidence. Her teachers noticed she was more focused, more outspoken in class. Her school counselor praised her emotional maturity and bravery. But Kathy didn't want praise. She wanted her life back, her family, her sense of safety. And slowly she was getting there. They donated Clara's things. took down the wedding decorations. Thomas even repainted the guest room, turning it into a creative space for Kathy. A room filled with plants, art supplies, and a cozy reading chair she picked out herself at a thrift store. "Our fresh start," he called it. One weekend, they drove up to a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Just the two of them. No phones, no news, just fresh air, starry skies, and the sound of leaves crunching under their boots. It was there, around a campfire with marshmallows in hand, that Kathy said something Thomas would never forget. "I used to think families had to be perfect to be happy," she said, "but now I know they just have to be honest." Thomas smiled through misty eyes. "Well, then we're going to be the happiest imperfect family there is." And they were. Because healing doesn't come from pretending nothing happened. It comes from facing the pain together, owning the mistakes, and choosing to move forward side by side. Thomas had almost lost everything. But thanks to a 12-year-old girl with courage beyond her years, he didn't just get a second chance, he got something stronger than he ever imagined. A bond built on truth. A home built on trust. A future that, while not perfect, was entirely their own. And in that simple, ordinary home on a quiet street, a father and daughter proved that even after betrayal and heartbreak, love could still win. We faced the storm, and we survived. A father and daughter's journey from betrayal to unshakable love. Weeks had passed since that unforgettable day. The day a 12-year-old girl stood up at her father's wedding and exposed the truth that no adult dared to see. Kathy didn't just stop a wedding, she saved a life. And now, in the quiet that followed the chaos, she and her father were finally learning what it meant to move forward, not as victims, but as survivors. The house, once a symbol of heartbreak, had transformed. No more wedding decorations, no more fake smiles, no more pretending. What was left was real, raw, and beautifully imperfect. Thomas had traded morning coffee with Clara for quiet breakfasts with Kathy. They'd sit at the small kitchen table, the scent of scrambled eggs and maple syrup in the air, flipping through the comics section of the Sunday paper. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, and that was okay, because silence between them now meant peace, not fear. But healing wasn't instant. Thomas still had moments where guilt washed over him like a wave. He'd stare at old family photos and wonder how he'd missed all the signs. He'd replay Clara's sweet lies in his mind, ashamed of how easily he had believed them. But each time the doubt crept in, he reminded himself of one simple truth. Kathy saw what he couldn't, and she never gave up. He started keeping a small notebook, just a cheap spiral-bound pad where he wrote down his thoughts, confessions, and promises. The first page read, "From now on, I listen." For Kathy, things were also shifting. At school, teachers noticed her walking taller, answering more questions, joining group projects she would have avoided months ago. She was no longer the quiet girl in the back of the room. She was the girl who knew what it meant to speak up, even when her voice shook. At home, she started drawing again. Her sketchbooks, once filled with dark shadows and tear-stained paper, now showed vibrant colors, sunsets, laughing animals, even silly cartoons of her and her dad making pancakes. Her art became her therapy, her voice when words felt too heavy. One Saturday, Thomas surprised her with a small upgrade to her room, a corner art station with a folding easel, a set of soft pastels, and a handwritten note that simply said, "For the girl who paints the truth." Kathy cried. But it wasn't sadness. It was relief. They were moving forward, together. They began making new memories. Movie nights with popcorn burned slightly too long. Road trips to little diners 2 towns over. Sunday hikes at state parks where Kathy always tried to outpace her dad, and usually won. Every shared laugh, every inside joke, every hug before bed was a brick in the foundation of the life they were rebuilding. But what stood out most wasn't what they added. It was what they no longer feared. No more watching their backs. No more questioning what was real. No more secrets. One night, as they sat out on the porch wrapped in blankets, Kathy looked up at the stars and whispered, "Do you think we'll ever forget her?" Thomas paused, then answered honestly, "No, and I don't think we should." She nodded, "Because forgetting means pretending it never happened. And what you did, what we went through, it changed us. But it didn't break us." She smiled. "We're stronger now." "Stronger than ever," he agreed, pulling her into a side hug. And it was true. The betrayal had been deep. Clara had lied, manipulated, and almost destroyed everything Thomas loved. But what she didn't count on was the fire inside a 12-year-old girl. A fire built from love, grief, instinct, and an unshakable need to protect the one person who had always been her hero. In the end, Kathy had become his hero too. And though their story wasn't perfect, though it came with scars and hard lessons, it was real. It was theirs. So no, they didn't go on a honeymoon. There was no wedding cake or romantic getaway. Instead, they chose healing over heartbreak, honesty over illusion, and love, the real, unshakable kind, over everything else. They had faced deception, danger, and disbelief. But they had also found something beautiful. Each other. She didn't just speak up, she changed everything. A final reflection on a daughter's unshakable courage. In the end, Kathy's voice was louder than any lie Clara could tell. Her courage didn't just stop a wedding, it rebuilt a life. A 12-year-old girl, armed only with love and instinct, saw the truth when no one else did. She exposed a woman's dark agenda, protected the father she adored, and reminded everyone watching that sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the greatest truth. Thomas didn't just regain his safety. He regained perspective, trust, a deeper bond with his daughter that no betrayal could destroy. Together, they didn't just recover, they rose, stronger, wiser, closer than ever. Their story isn't just about stopping something terrible, it's about starting something better. A new chapter built not on fantasy, but on faith in one another. It's a reminder to every parent. Listen when your child speaks. Sometimes they're the ones saving you. And to every young girl like Kathy, never underestimate the power of your voice, because you just might change everything.